Hello everyone, Furness here, and welcome back to Furness's workshop. Or should I say Furness's desktop? Because in this video, we won't be going through a physical modelling process, but rather a digital one, and you've all seen the title so you know where this is going. So if you've seen my videos, you'll have definitely noticed that I use custom faces on my models. I mostly do this to give them a bit of life and atmosphere to the videos I make. Since I started using them, I've had a number of comments asking if I'd do a video on how I make them, considering they're custom designs and not just screenshots from the show or anything, only based on them. It's a fairly simple process, and so in this video, I'll be walking you lot through it. This video isn't intended to be a tutorial, but if you'd like to use or adapt my methods for yourselves, then go ahead. And just a little disclaimer before we start, custom faces aren't a necessity for a good video, it's more the story you're creating that makes it good. I just do it because it's a preference. Now, onto the video. First, I need to decide what character I'm going to be making faces for. In this video, I'll be using Oliver as my example. Once I've figured out the who, I move on to the what reference I'll be using to create the faces. Usually, there are character face references on the Thomas wiki, but those pictures are sometimes taken at weird angles, and I won't always get the best results. Just take a look at the faces I made for Emily. So what I do instead if that happens, is just do a Google search in hopes I find a better image. Or better still, somebody on DeviantArt makes a poster for faces used on trains models. This image by JK0424 is perfect, so I'll be using this as a reference. I'll also be making face references for Toad, but his face reference on the wiki is just a nice angle for me to work with, so I'll be using that. Once the references are saved, I move on to the main bit, creating the faces. So I start by opening 3 windows on Microsoft Paint, one to create the faces on, one for the references, and one for a previous set of faces I've made. That last one is just so I can copy over the colours I've used, as well as getting the face references down to the right size. The first step to creating the faces is pasting the first face in, which is usually the character's regular grinning face. They usually turn out too big when pasted in, so I scale them down. For Oliver's face, I scaled it down to 70%. I then remove half of the face and get started on the basic outlines. The eye, eyebrow, nose, cheeks and mouth are all traced around in a light grey, and a darker grey is used to define that eye, nose and cheek. All the shades of white, black and grey I'm using are copied over from Donald and Douglas's faces with a colour picker, and the eye is the same one used across all my faces. It usually takes me a few tries to get certain details right, especially the noses. And with Oliver, I'm in for a real treat. Seriously, why is his nose so big? Once I'm done and happy with the half face, I copy it and flip it horizontally to get the other half of the face, and flip the eye so the sparkle in the corner is in the same position. Now Oliver's face here doesn't look exactly right, and that's the tedious part about making these faces. It's like Uncanny Valley the way they look right, but something is always off no matter what I change. I'm pretty sure the only faces I did nail on the first go was the Scottish twins. I then mess around with it for a bit, changing details here and there, and get something I'm more happier with. And only then I'll consider the first face done. Of course it isn't 100% accurate, but these faces aren't supposed to be. They're my take on them. Most of the faces I've made don't look 100% to what they're based on, but I'm happy with how they turn out regardless of the fact. The next step is actually doing the template, what I'll use to base all the other faces on. With the first face complete, I'll copy half of it, remove the eyebrow, mouth and cheek line, leaving only the eye and nose. This just makes it easier to create the different expressions later on, and makes the process a whole lot quicker. I can then move on to creating all the different expressions. I'll be using most of the expressions in this reference, bar that creepy looking concerned face, and the fan-made clenching one. The next face I made for Oliver is his cheerful face. With the template now done, I copy that, and only paste in the features I need to use. The mouth, cheek line and eyebrow. I also widen the eyes a little like on the actual face. Once that one was done, I made my first custom face for Oliver. This one is based on his cocky face edit the Unlucky Tug made for his Oliver's Great Escape video. This one was just his grinning face with his eyelids slightly down, and one eyebrow slightly raised. I also decided to give him a cheeky smirk. After that face was his sleeping face, which I usually just use a grinning or neutral expression for, just editing the eyes to be closed. Once I'm done with all the smiling expressions, I move on to the unhappy faces, which include but not limited to sad, angry, surprised, etc, etc. Oliver's sad and angry faces were pretty fun to recreate, and those two I think turned out to be the most accurate looking out of a lot, especially his angry one. One thing I will say though, especially about the angry faces, is that because the eyebrows are at an angle over the top of the eyes, it makes it a little harder for me to position the eyes, which I'll be getting onto later, considering I'm using Microsoft Paint of all things. The next face after those two was the shocked face, which is usually the easiest expression to do, not counting the sleeping faces. Like with the cheerful expression, I widen the eyes here too. At this point I had completed all the official faces I wanted to make, and now it's time to make 2 custom faces to finish a batch. The first was the clenched expression. When a character doesn't have an official one like Oliver, I tend to get a bit creative here, and it just involves taking the angry face, editing out the eyes, and adding lines to make it look like they're being held firmly shut, as well as creating a new mouth, which in Oliver's case are teeth clenched together instead of the lips like on most other faces, which I feel suits him more. The final face was a winking face, something fun I make for most of the characters I've done faces for. This one was quite simple. I took Oliver's cheerful face and copied one eye from his clenched face. I did try and edit the forehead wrinkles as best as I could to make them work, but in the end I gave up and just removed them entirely. Once that one was done, Oliver's faces were complete. Now for the next step, positioning the eyes. There are 4 positions I do for the eyes, up, down, left and right. I start by making a copy of the original paint file, and I usually do left and right first, as they're just easier. I just select around the eyes and move them. Simple, until it isn't. Especially on angry faces. There are times where I've had to completely copy the eyebrows from the original file, because the eyes have overlapped it. Well, that's just because I'm using Microsoft Paint. I'm sure this step would be a lot easier in, say, Photoshop, but I digress. Once all the eyes are positioned to the left, I can just make a copy of this file, and then mirror the eyes to the right. That's what I think the easiest part of the process is. For the up and down faces, I go back to a copy of the original file, and move them in the up and down positions. Down is pretty straightforward, but up makes me feel down. Again, I will have to copy the eyebrows or eyelids if the eyes overlap them, which does happen a lot when doing the up position. This is easily my least favourite bit of the process. But once that's done, all the faces are done. I also did this entire method with Toad. For characters like him, the process is the exact same, except the face is rectangular. When the faces are done, I paste them into a Google Docs file. This is where real life craftiness comes into play. I first hold up a sheet of regular A4 paper up to my monitor, and size the document on the screen accordingly. On my monitor, the size for the document ends up being around 115%. This will of course depend on the size of the monitor. This is so the faces, when sized properly, will turn out pretty much the exact size I want them to. I then cut a square of paper out and sort of mush it against where the face is going to go, at least in Toad's case here, to get an outline of how big the face needs to be. In Oliver's case, I looked for another set of faces that had a close enough size for his smoke box. Percy's worked just fine here. I then either hold that up to the faces on the document, but because I'm holding a phone here, I've just stuck them on my monitor with blue tack. Once all the faces are scaled to exactly the right size, they're printed off and cut out. The final step is stuffing a bit of blue tack in the smoke box and sticking the face on. And there you have it, that is the process I go through to make the faces. Once again, this isn't meant to be a tutorial, it's my very scuffed method on how I make them, but if you'd like to use these methods for yourself, then feel free to. Part of the inspiration I had for my method was a video by Master of the Lemons from a few years ago, which I recommend you check out. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Furness's Workshop, and consider subscribing if you haven't already, it really means a lot. Thank you for watching everyone, and I'll see you next time.